Solicited Hell Gear, and this is a Penguin deck profile for January 2021. Now that we've entered the colder months of the year, I figured some colder themed deck profiles would come up. And the elastic, rubbery, bouncy penguins of Crump from the Big Five of Yu-Gi-Oh! Enter the Shadow Realm are one of the decks that fits the bill. Really do enjoy playing this deck. So as always, remember to like, sub, and bell for more, and let me know what you think of my build in the comment section below. Before I count the cards, I just want to make one thing clear about the Penguin archetype. The Penguins take up multiple archetypes, but the Penguins in this deck all span the Aqua type. So, let's count the cards. We begin with the vanilla of the family, 3 copies of Flying Penguin. A lot of people don't really use this card because it's a vanilla per se, and this is a really rough card to come across. So if you don't have this card, a lot of people are using the Bolt Penguin instead. But Bolt Penguin is not level 4 at Aqua, is level 3 and a Thunder monster, but they're used primarily for the same thing. Next up, have 1 copy of Penguin Torpedo. The Penguin Torpedo can attack your opponent directly. When it does, it can take control of a level 6 or lower monster your opponent controls. But the monster cannot be attributed. Also, at the end of the battle step, when this card attacks, it is destroyed. So it's a nice little suicidal blast that lets you steal a monster for a little, well, steal one of your opponent's monsters. Still a nice get. Too bad it doesn't work for extra deck monsters that are not level centric. So keep that in mind as you play this card. Next up, 3 copies of what they call the quote-unquote Lord and Savior, No Penguin. It has 2 abilities. It can be revived from the graveyard when the effect of a penguin monster is activated once per turn. And if a penguin monster's effect would bounce an opponent's card to the hand, it's banished instead. A lot of plays work around this guy, and he's actually one of the stronger penguins in your entire deck. Next up, one of the newer faces on the block from the 5Ds era, 3 copies of Glacial Beast Polar Penguin. If it's special summoned, you can bounce a monster your opponent controls. And if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, it can also bounce a monster. Again, both of these effects are once per turn. Next up, 3 copies of the Great Emperor Penguin. This is probably the only tribute summon that you might do for the deck. When it's tributed, you can special summon 2 other penguin monsters from your deck to the field. So it's a nice way to extend when you can get it off on your turn. Next up, 2 copies of Puny Penguin. Puny Penguin is used to recur your other penguins from the deck, but it has to be destroyed. It has to be flipped face up and destroyed in order to do so. I do not play 1-for-1 in this deck, and when you do revive a penguin off a Puny Penguin, it's either in face up attack or face down defense position. 2 copies of Mr. Crump himself, Nightmare Penguin. The minor 200 attack and defense point boost is not why you're playing this. It is one of those cards that when it is flipped, it can bounce a card hard. So, unlike the next monster, this one is a universal card. It also has the more of the defensive points, which is a very nice touch when you need it. Now, Nightmare Penguin can only bounce 1 card when it's flipped, but Penguin Soldier, which I run 2 copies of, can bounce 2 monsters when it is flipped. A very useful card that works rather well in combination with No Penguin, because again, when you have your No Penguin on the field, when you activate the bounce effect, you can have him banish the 2 monsters that you would bounce to the deck. And remember, even if your opponent doesn't have monsters and Penguin Soldier would survive the blow, it can also bounce itself back to your hand. A nice little bit of spice that I like to play is my copy of Barrier Statue of the Torrent. There are many ways to tutor this out. And do not be afraid of the 1-turn stun. None of the meta decks right now are water attributes, so the longer you can lock your opponent out of tougher monsters, the better. Now, this next little piece, I'm taking a text straight from Mr. MCO40, so kudos to you on hipping me to this, and that is 2 copies of Barastos the Fathomer. If this card is in your hand, you can tribute up to 2 cards face up on your field or in your hand, including at least 1 water monster, and if you do, special summon the card. If both of the waters you use for this are both of the cards you use are water monsters, you can target up to 2 spell and traps on your opponent's field or graveyard and banish them. And if this card is destroyed by a card effect, you can special summon another non-water worm monster to your field in defense position. Now, one thing I found interesting about that is you're only running these. So what I also did was I added a copy of Lithosogem to the mix. And it's a really funny way of keeping through systems. You'll special summon one of your Barastos, and yes, we are running VFD in the extra deck, because why not? If one of your Barastos gets blasted by, say, Solemn Strike, after that resolves, this goes to the deck, you bring out your Lithosogem, and then when Lithosogem falls by the same thing, you bring out Barastos number 2. And it's a fun little chain of True King events there. Not bad for the monster game. So, spell game, I have 2 copies of Unexpected Die. This is how we tutor out the flying or bolt penguin without the use of a rescue rabbit. So you don't have to burn through a normal summon just to get our vanilla birds out there on the field. Next up, 2 copies of the best spell in almost every water deck, Water Hazard. It doesn't matter what water deck except for Cloudian, you're going to be playing this card. Simply put, if you control no monsters, once per turn, you can special summon a level 4 or lower water monster from your hand. This card is so good with Glacial Beast Polar Penguin because if you have an empty board, you play that, you special summon this, and it's a free bounce. So it can take out a threat when you need it to. And we take those in the Penguin deck. We take those. We have the standard Foolish Burial because, you know, we got to put things in the graveyard like the quote-unquote savior of the deck, no Penguin. 2 Books of Moon. Again, kudos to MCO40 for telling us the nice cost of this secret rare version from the Legendary Collection. Really nice stuff here. You can even flip your penguins face down and use their effects again. 2 copies of Moray of Greed for draw power because it's still one of the best draw powers for water decks. Then we have our Call by the Grave. Don't need to worry about that. Next off, we have our Revival Engine, which includes 1 Monster Reborn, 1 Surface, which gets us a level 3 or lower water monster in our graveyard. Well, not water monster. Fish, Sea Serpent, or Aqua monster from our graveyard, special summon to defense mode. I would love to get another copy of that. But in the meantime, if you don't have it, there's also this trap card known as Burst Rebirth. Burst Rebirth is the beginning of our trap game, by the way. So, what it does is you pay 2,000 life points and you special summon a monster in your graveyard in face down defense position. This works very good with Polar Penguin, Nightmare Penguin, and the Penguin Soldier. You can also, if you summoned it properly, pull Barastos out from your graveyard face down, just to mix things up. Continuing on with the trap game, 2 copies of Junk Sleep. This is a really interesting trap to play in the deck that we got from Phantom Rage. When your opponent summons monsters, you can flip all face-up monsters you control face down. And at the end of the turn, you can flip your face-down monsters face-up. I believe both of these are once per turn effects, which goes very well with the flipping aspects of our watery birds. 2 Paleozoic Dynamicious, because we all know how good Paleo Dynamicious is. And because penguin decks aren't that strong, I'm also running 2 copies of Paleo Hallucigenia. To those of you who don't know about Paleo Hallucigenia, it essentially cuts the attack points of one of your opponent's monsters for the turn. Well, it also cuts defense, but link monsters have no points to defend. So, if you need to, you can chop down a big cherry tree. Or, if you do it properly, you can use this alongside of a bouncing penguin and reset the board. That's all for the main deck, so let's get into our extra deck game here. Starting with the new lead of the deck, 2 copies of Penguin Brave. It has 2 effects. When it's synchro summoned, you can take a penguin monster in your deck and special summon it face down. And as a quick effect, when your opponent activates a card effect, you can flip a face down penguin monster you control face up. It also protects your face down defense position water monsters too, which is always a good thing to have, giving the bouncy elastic penguins a real extra bit of protection. Little fun fact here, the reason why they changed the name from Penguin Heroes to Penguin Brave is not to confuse this card with the hero archetype. Next up, I run a copy of Glacial Beast Iceberg Narwhal. This is a battle phase negate, and when your opponent destroys another monster you control, you can deal 600 burn damage. Very useful for its purposes here. And of course, the negate and destroy is once per turn. I run 1 copy of Gungnir, Dragon of the Ice Boundary. You can discard up to 2 cards and blast that same number of cards in your opponent's side of the field. Gradle Dragon works in a similar manner, but it blasts monsters equal to the number of water monsters used for its synchro summon. And if it dies by card effect, you can special summon another monster from your graveyard with its effects negated once per turn. The True Kings are not the only level 9 monsters we run. Trishula is one of those things. Ripping out and banishing cards is great, and there are 3 different penguin combinations using Glacial Polar Penguin to synchro summon this level 9 monster. With the exception of Lithosogem and any other hand traps in your side deck, every monster in the deck is water, so Abyss Dweller is very comfortable at home. We have our Bahamut Shark, which pulls out our Totally Awesome. That's self-explanatory. VFD. No need to explain this guy. Then we have our Mistar Boy for the attack boost, a much better attack boost than Nightmare Penguin, plus it can recur a water monster, which is always nice. Marincess Coral Anemone also recurs a water monster. Union Carrier is that good stun. It is also one of the ways to pull out Barrier Statue of the Torrent. Alright, and if you can summon 3 monsters, which isn't too hard to do if you set up no penguin with Foolish Burial and have Water Hazard, you can get 3 penguins out on the field. Use 2 for the link summon of Union Carrier, and then target the 3rd one and equip the Barrier Statue of the Torrent to it, and you've essentially given that extra penguin, usually no penguin, another 1,000 attack points, plus you've stunned your opponent into water monsters, which is a very good thing because in the meta right now, only Prank Kids is main decking water monsters. So you're restricting them to Prank Kids Dropsies, and Prank Kids is limited to 2 cards in their extra deck. The Sea Monster Theseus, if they're playing it, and of course the Weather Machine. So if they aren't using those, you're pretty much going to stun your opponents. And if you're using this against Drytron, and you can get your Barrier Statue out with Union Carrier on your first turn, you essentially win the duel against them. And lastly, we have Nightmare's Phoenix and Unicorn to round out the extra deck. We all know how good the Nightmare engine is. So that's it for the Penguin deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, sub, and bell, and let me know what you think of my build in the comments section below. But for now, I take my cards to the box because I'm done. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.